Steve Miner would return to direct the third installment in the Friday the 13th series. Originally, the film was supposed to focus on Ginny Field, who checked herself into a mental institution after her traumatic battle with Jason Voorhees in the previous film. The film would have been similar to Halloween 2, with Jason Voorhees tracking down Ginny in the mental institution, similar to how Michael Myers stalked Laurie Strode in the sequel. This concept was abandoned when Amy Steele declined to reprise her role. The producers decided to not use the burlap sack Jason wore in the previous film due to its unintentional similarities to David Lynch's The Elephant Man. For Part 3, they moved production from Connecticut to California, where they could be closer to the Hollywood experts needed for a film that was attempting to revitalize 3D. They told the East Coast-based Steve Dash if he wanted to play Jason as he did for most of Part 2, he'd have to pay for his own airfare out to California. He objected, so the part was recast, with Richard Broker, a former English trapeze artist who could perform all of his own stunts and appear physically intimidating. The script for Part 3 called for Jason to wear a mask to cover his face, having worn a bag over his head in Part 2. What no one knew at the time was that the mask chosen would become a trademark for the character, and one instantly recognizable in pop culture in the years to come. Martin J. Sadoff, the film's 3D effects supervisor, is responsible for coming up with Jason's trademark hockey mask. Sadoff always kept the bag with him full of hockey gear on set because he was an avid hockey fan. While testing potential masks to use for Jason, he pulled out a Detroit Red Wings goalie mask for the test. Director Steve Miner loved the look, and had Douglas White make some modifications to the mask, and after that decided to use it in the film. Stan Winston was brought in to create and sculpt Jason's face. Winston's mask was never used in the film but can be seen in the alternate ending when Jason decapitates Chris. Dana Kimmel was cast as Chris Higgins. Paul Karaka, who plays Rick, originally auditioned for the role of Andy, but the filmmakers thought he would make a better Rick. Jeffrey Rogers would be cast as Andy. Tracy Savage would be cast as Debbie. Catherine Parks would be cast as Vera Sanchez. Larry Zerner was cast as Shelley when producers spotted him handing out flyers for a horror movie and asked him if he wanted to star in one himself. David Cadams was cast as Chuck. And Rachel Howard would be cast as Chili. Nick Savage would play Ali. Gloria Charles would be cast as Fox. And Kevin O'Brien would be cast as Loco. The film's music was composed by Harry Manfredini, who previously composed the scores of the series' first two installments. To prevent the film's plot being leaked, the production used the fake title Crystal Japan after a David Bowie song. This began an on-again, off-again tradition of giving Friday the 13th films David Bowie songs. The film was shot with the Aravision over and under 3D camera, the same that was used with Jaws 3D. Part 3 was the first production to use the Mark's 3D system, and it was a constant learning process. The earliest scenes they filmed, such as the opening track shot, and Shelley and the bikers at the convenience store, had to be completely reshot due to difficulties with the 3D camera. Plus, they had to be careful about which colors to include in costumes, and everything had to be lit far brighter than normal. It took hours to set up individual shots, meaning the actors in the film spent most of their time simply sitting around, waiting for their next shot to be set up. A common on-set experience for actors, but just far longer than normal this time. This focus on 3D spilled over to the actors. Initially, they were asked to learn how to use a paddle ball for a planned 3D sequence. When that was scrapped, they looked for any way the actors could do something that would play well in 3D, like Larry Zerner's juggling or throwing a wallet straight at the camera, or another actor dropping a yo-yo down towards the camera. Indeed, many of the actors now recall that there was more focus on finding cool 3D things for them to do than actually acting. By some estimates, Paramount was forced to spend between $8 million and $10 million to actually get Part 3 into theaters. That's because they ended up making, supplying, and installing the individual lenses and silver screens required to project Part 3 in all 1,079 theaters, which showed the film opening weekend in August 1982. They also had to train the projectionists at theaters and establish a 24-hour hotline for all the theaters encountering problems with the 3D. There were multiple scripted endings, such as Chris and Ali both surviving, as opposed to just Chris, but Jason's body being MIA when the cops arrive. In the first ending they actually filmed, though Chris dreams she's in the canoe, hears Rick calling to her from the house, as she races to greet him at the door, and then Jason emerges from the door instead of Rick, and cuts Chris's head clean off with a machete. They decided it was too depressing to kill off the sole survivor, even if it was just a dream, and that Jason Sand's mask looked too much like a monster. Friday the 13th Part 3 was filmed mostly in Santa Clarita and Los Angeles, California. The film was actually released on a Friday the 13th, on August 13th, 1982. When first released, the film was intended to end the series as a trilogy. Despite negative reviews from critics, Friday the 13th Part 3 grossed over $36 million at the US box office on a budget of $2.3 million. The film was the first to remove E.T. from the #1 box office spot and become the second highest grossing horror film of 1982, behind Poltergeist. The film had the third most attendance of any film in the Friday the 13th series, with approximately over 11 million tickets sold during its initial run. Jason's look in this film, which varies greatly from his predecessor, has become the look to which the character is modeled in later incarnations. Friday the 13th Part 3 was released on VHS on September 28, 1994, and on DVD on February 3, 2009, and on Blu-ray on June 16, 2009. And it is featured in the book Crystal Lake Memories that was released on October 1st, 2006, as well as DVD and Blu-ray versions of the book released on September 13th, 2013, and featured in the Blu-ray box set released on September 13th, 2013. On May 26, 2017, Friday the 13th, the game was released on Xbox One and PS4, which featured many of the Jasons from the films. I hope you've enjoyed this brief look at Friday the 13th Part 3. Join me next time as we take a brief look at Friday the 13th Part 4.